Hello, everybody, and welcome to the next episode of the new data analytics stream. Today we have another MVP, ACA, ACT, and I
Lots of letters.
I lost those words. We have Richie here, and he will will tell us a little bit about financial data and financial functions and how we can use it with Power BI, Fabric, and Gen AI. And now we come to the administrative stuff. It's a little boring, but you can get your certificate on this link you see on the bottom. And we have the Q&A session after. And also the idea here is to be a community. So when you write lion in the chat, it means you are open to connect. And if you like more of these events, join us on Meetup. And so my starting question is, I see so much of you. You have all these titles, but we have doing another kind of community. You are the co-founder of Learning Data Insights. What kind of community is this?
Yeah, so Learn Data Insights it's something I set up ages ago. It was really for quiz questions for Power BI. So for the it was actually DA100 when I first set it up. Then I added a few other ones in there, like AZ900, PL900, it's kind of grown. And I grew that site in terms of functionality, and I probably put a bit too much into it. And I've not really kind of done a huge amount of work onto it recently. So it's something I'm actually going to do a bit of a rebrand on and make that a parent site. And then actually I've got other sites. So I've got powerplatformfinance.com, and that's the main one I'm kind of working on at the moment. And that's aimed at finance professionals. So I'm running a course through there, financial reporting with Power BI. And that's actually starting it's a cohort-based course. So it's basically, one of the things I'm really passionate about actually is getting the right kind of learning. Like, learning this stuff is hard. So I want to make sure the content is right and the method is right. And my MBA that I did actually was all taught through a mobile app, through interactive e-learning. And it really inspired me as well to say, look, I really think there's an opportunity to do tech learning in this way as well. So I'm doing it as a cohort-based course. So I've done 20 to 30 hours of e-learning content and then weekly review sessions. So you can ask questions when you get stuck. You've got that instructor-led training. You've got that interaction. You learn as part of a group. All of these things combined really enhance the learning experience. And so what I'm trying to do is do that. And actually, what I'm running through today, the same data set, the same report, the same requirements, it's all exactly the same. So I don't actually use Gen AI in the course. It's all done through Power BI Desktop. And this is now we're doing it through Gen AI and Power BI and Fabric. So, it's a good question to see at the end, especially if there's some people here who are actually on the current cohort. What do you think? Do you think actually this can replace that role? Do I still need that course anymore? Or should I do it all through Gen AI? I've got my views on it, but we'll leave that till the end. But if you do want to sign up for the next cohort, there's only a few spaces left on it. It's just a powerplatformfinance.com, and then you can go to courses. You can see from there.
Yeah, I think the idea is also make more free content in the world.
Yeah, I mean, there's free content on there as well. So community sessions. There's a reason. Yeah, I've wanted. So obviously, look, I do a lot of stuff for community, and I'm more than happy to do more sessions like this as well, right? And really try to explore new ideas. But what I wanted to do is take a small group of people and just have that real impact. Take them on that journey, because there's one thing to have content, and there's loads of content. We've all got access to hours and hours of e-learning content on YouTube, or YouTube, blog articles, everything else. So I want to take a slightly different approach with a smaller group each quarter for this specific stuff, but absolutely. And obviously I'm open to questions and open to help people in the community. That's absolutely what I love doing.
That's the idea, I think. So it's the next episode. I go from the stage, collect the questions in the chat.
Sure. Yeah, please.
And it's showtime for you.
Brilliant. Okay, great. Yeah, so thanks everyone for joining. By the way, I do have like a full hour of content, so I will probably leave a lot of questions till the end, but I'm happy to stay on for a bit longer to answer them, or to answer them asynchronously on LinkedIn comments or chat, for example. And if any of you've worked with Power BI Copilot or Fabric Copilot or Gen AI in general, you'll know that it can be a bit inconsistent and with the time that it takes and the results that it returns. So I've actually pre-recorded a lot of these demos. What that does mean is I can potentially share these outputs with people. And I'm thinking of actually putting them into a mini course after this. So if that's something you're interested in, probably the best thing to do is actually sign up on Power Platform Financials for the free modules. And then I'll make sure everyone on there is notified, or add me on LinkedIn or whatever else is easiest. So just to set the scene, I'll start with a bit of background. Everyone can see the slides. Yep. Cool. So I'll start with a bit of background to myself. I come from a bit of a mix of business and technology areas. I'm a chartered accountant, as Mirko said, and graduated with honors from an executive MBA program last year. But I'm also a Microsoft MVP. And my day job is working for the largest Microsoft partner globally, Avanade, which is a joint venture between Microsoft and Accenture. I'm also obsessed with making learning engaging, making it accessible, relevant, and fun. And then let's have a look at some of that later through this. So we'll start with an overview of Power BI. I wanted to start to provide a bit of context around how data roles in a traditional operating model work, and how I see that being different with Fabric, just to really set the scene about where Fabric and where Copilot sit as part of all of this. So these data roles can be represented by this pyramid structure. At the bottom, so the vast majority of the organization, we have data consumers. They're not responsible for producing analytics, but rather just consuming the outputs. So say a static PowerPoint decks with a narrative, or interactive reports in Power BI. We then have data explorers. And these are the individuals responsible for producing the data stories based on the curated data sets produced by those higher up in the pyramid. They could use Excel and perhaps Power BI for visualizations, but likely is they don't know Power Query and DAX to do that kind of analytics work themselves. Then we have red belts, and these are the people who are the data analysts and the data scientists. They live in the self-serve analytics world provided by tools like Power BI. They work on automating existing processes and building business domain logic in Power Query and DAX, and maybe Excel VBA and Python or R. They typically don't have direct access to kind of source ERP systems and things like that, but rather they access data warehouses developed by data engineers, by the black belts. And they do a lot of valuable work, but they typically work in this world of kind of shadow IT. This is the traditional model. And then at the top of the pyramid, we have our black belts, who are data engineers that typically work in Azure. Now, these people really exist in the IT function, so they don't necessarily have that business domain specific knowledge and can't bake that into the solutions that they build, but they work directly against enterprise source systems like ERP applications. They ingest the data into a data warehouse or data platform in a consistent, scalable, and performant manner with MPP, massively parallel processing architectures, separation of storage and compute, centralized security. And this really allows an organization to be able to apply that enterprise level security and governance to solutions and deal with structured, unstructured, real-time data, or all sorts of things. So these data engineers have specialist skills, and whilst having these specialisms, it seems like a very efficient way of working, in reality, it has a number of challenges. The data and engineering and BI teams end up becoming a bottleneck. So as much as they can provide these data platforms and clean curated data, that's a fairly long process. It takes months to gather business requirements, to set up the infrastructure, to design a solution, and then to build it in a platform like Azure. And these business users end up just taking the data and putting it into Excel to be able to apply their own business logic to it, or combine data together anyway. So this creates data duplication, silos, and it makes the CDO's job of trying to harmonize data quality, data security, and governance across all these systems and platforms basically impossible. So what Microsoft have done is come up with Microsoft Fabric. So it's a unified platform that brings all of these Azure data platform tools like data factory pipelines, warehouses, notebooks into the same software services environment, software as a service environment as Power BI. So these can all be set up like with a single click. The data is in a single format across all of these. and it doesn't need to be moved from one environment to another. It's all stored in one lake, data lake, in Delta Parquet format, and then all the Fabric workloads, including Power BI, work directly on top of it. So the aim of this is really to help eliminate those data silos and some of that complexity. So all of those personas that we saw in the previous slide, they work in the same environment, all within Fabric, and on the same copy of data. Consistent governance, security, and access across it all. And it's also designed to appeal to the skill sets of both traditional data engineers and low-code analysts who are used to working in Power BI. You have Dataflows in the Power BI world, as well as code-first tools like notebooks for shaping and cleaning data. And obviously, Copilot experiences across all of these areas. So you can have a lot of it driven from natural language prompts, which again makes it really powerful and really accessible. And just to then think about what that operating model looks like with Fabric and Copilot. So the red and the black belt personas have merged into this analytics engineer role, shaping and curating data sets to prepare for analytics for enterprise fashion. And then there are developer or creator copilots to help with this. And then data explorers and consumers both can also leverage Copilot to automate the insights from these data sets. And as such, could really self-serve on the data rather than relying on the levels above to produce these pre-canned reports and decks for consumption. And that's really what I see as the real value proposition for a team like finance, right? You can have your CFO go into a Teams chatbot and say, well, what was my revenue last year? What was driving the increase? Or, where did we spend more on costs this month? And we'll see some of that here, but actually being able to have someone be able to query that data without having to go back to your finance team and say, can you tell me what's behind this number? Can you produce this other set of analysis for me? Being able to do that independently and being able to self-serve in that way is really the value proposition and the holy grail of where we want to get to with this. So there are 3 main copilots currently in Fabric, but more are being released, I think, in every workload. I think in Fabric is either has Copilot or is getting Copilot. So within Power BI Copilot, we have both report creator and report consumer experiences. So for data transformation and shaping and preparing the data for analytics, there are copilots within notebooks to help write PySpark code, and in Dataflows to help with data transformation steps. There's also other copilots which have been launched or announced, to start SQL Copilot to write and explain SQL queries, and Copilot for Custo, where you can translate from natural language or SQL, I think, into Custo, and that's the language for real-time intelligence. So lots of different copilots across Fabric. Just to hone in on the Power BI ones a little bit. Oh, sorry, I had the slides going forward. Sorry about that. Just to, so on my end. So this was the operating model with Fabric and Copilot. So we've got the analytics engineer roles, been merging the red and black belts, and then the data explorers and consumers also merged there as well. Right, and then we've got Fabric Copilot experiences. So we've got Power BI, we've got data science, data engineering, so notebooks, and Data Factory. And now just to hone in on the Power BI Copilot experiences. Okay, everyone can see the screens now, yeah? That's updating, right? Oh, that's okay. I'll carry on. So for Power BI Copilot, we have Copilot to help with creating reports. So these are reading table, column, and measure names and looking at the data in order to suggest report content and create some simple base visuals for these reports. And for report creators, you also have Copilot to help create DAX measures based on natural language prompts and to understand or create descriptions for existing measures. As a report consumer, you can ask questions of the report or the data, and you can ask Copilot to summarize the insights displayed in a report or in a data set. You can ask questions about the data set, say something like, can you tell me how this measure has trended over time? And we've also started to see how data within the Fabric data platform might be brought into other Copilot experiences through things like AI skills, which is something in public preview, and we'll have a look at that at the end. So this is a diagram from a white paper written by some fellow Accenture colleagues that outlines the analytics workflow and looks at different types of tasks, creative assistance tasks, automation tasks that can be helped using Copilot and Gen AI in general, because the whole point is we're not restricted to just Power BI and Fabric Copilot. We could use ChatGPT, Perplexity AI, or anything. And actually, if we look across the whole analytics workflow, Copilot will help us with some of it, but not all of it. We can see that Gen AI can actually help with things like user and design requirements. It can help with preparing, cleaning, and structuring that data into a star schema for Power BI. It can be used for wireframing, designing the reports, and obviously for the consumption experiences of explaining and summarizing the data as well. So with that in mind, this is what we'll be covering for the rest of this session. So the first thing with any data analytics project is to start with the end in mind and work out what insights specifically you want your audience to be able to get from the data products that you build in Microsoft Fabric. This is not something that's immediately obvious, and it's not something you could do after you've built your analytics data products. It's something you need to build specific data products in Fabric and Power BI for specific audiences with specific pain points, rather than trying to build a solution that is just all things to all people. So the first few steps in here are around doing some of that initial exploration of your data. Here, I'm actually using this suggestion to use Power BI Copilot to explore the data initially, identifying who your audience is or what insights they need, and then designing a corresponding Power BI semantic model. This semantic model in Power BI has your data in the right structure, it has relationships between those tables, it has DAX logic, and it has things like row-level security built in as well. These semantic models are really key to be able to derive the kind of insights that you need from Copilot. So we need to be able to then, this gives us a blueprint for how we need to clean and shape our data to get it from its raw format into that star schema data model that we need for Power BI. So this is things like putting the right logic in, the right DAX measures, but also the right metadata. So things like table and column descriptions that could be referenced by Copilot, and even includes things like synonyms so that Copilot understands your own business lexicon. And you could use the developer Copilot in Fabric to help with all of that as well. So we've got lots of stuff here around the semantic modeling. And again, really key to build these right semantic models so that Copilot understands your data. We then need to create reports in Power BI, so storytelling with Power BI visualization. And I'll show some examples of Power BI visualization techniques that I've used, as well as being able to get insights from the consumer Power BI Copilot experiences to help with that storytelling and digging into that detail. So both Power BI native functionality and Copilot functionality, consumer functionality on top of that. And then we've got also looking at publishing these models and say bringing it into other Copilot experiences or making it more accessible beyond the realm of Fabric and Copilot. And that's something you'll see Microsoft are continuing to really invest in. There's a lot of work to create these enterprise level data products that can be used by Copilot. So we're looking at AI skills, and then we'll also look at actually just calling Azure OpenAI with a notebook to be able to build our own kind of vector search index. So I think this is taking it to the next level and a real hint of what we'll start to see in the future with Gen AI and LLMs. So before I get started with that, are there any kind of questions? I can see 2 questions in there around notebooks. I'll explain notebooks when I come to it. Our Copilots.
Yeah, we have, I'm back here. Hello.
Yeah, hey, Maka.
2 questions. Can someone explain notebooks?
Yeah, I can see that. So yeah, I'll explain notebooks when I come to it. And someone's asking, our Copilots are perfect. No, far from perfect. Very far from perfect. But let's come back to that question at the end. Yeah. Yeah,
but there's a lot of interesting stuff about notebooks. There's I don't know.
Absolutely.
I forgot the company name. Jupyter is the company. I like those notebooks, and we have another question, but I think it's not. Are the Copilots are perfect?
Yeah, I saw that one as well. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think, as I said, I saw that question. I think the answer is no. They're far from perfect. But, I say let's come back and do an evaluation of Copilot once we've seen it in action. I think that'll be better. Cool.
So we look at your presentation.
Yeah, right, exactly. Let's carry on. So let's start with having a look at the data that we're going to be using here. So we've got actuals data, which is a bunch of CSV files, one for each month. We've got budget data, which is an Excel file, and reference data, which is also an Excel file. So if we actually just open up the actuals folder first, this contains 3 years worth of data. So 36 monthly CSV files from July 2019 to June 2022, which obviously we need to combine together to be able to have it in one table. That's going to be part of our ETL. If we open up one of these files, we can see we have some header rows at the top, which we don't need. So we'd have to get rid of those. We combine it. We then have some keys. So we have organization, department, account, and date, and then the amount in local currency. And that local currency relates to the location of the organization unit in the organization key. And that's where the transaction occurred. And we look at budget data. So the budget data is actually at a month level rather than day level. And we don't have departments. We have budgets assigned to particular departments. So we have a budget type, which is either standard or re-baselined. And we have a budget amount also in local currency. If we now look at the reference data. So the first reference data sheet is our chart of accounts. And this is fairly standard with every accounting data set. Our journal is always booked against 2 accounts. So we just see the income statement ones here. We just look at income statement. We have our accounts, so what type of account they are, revenue or expense will be one of those. And then where does this sit in the income statement? Is it revenue line? Is it operating expenses? Is it cost of sales? And this links into this, which we have next, which is our income statement layout. This is a manual table. We just produced in Excel, a helper table that has the chart of accounts headers in there, but also our subtotals like gross profit and gross margin. So this is what we want our income statement to look like. In exact order, we have dates, just a standard date table, continuous list of dates. We have departments, just a list of departments, department names. And then we have organizations next. So organizations here. So this is each organization unit, the name of the organization unit, and then also the currency code. So I was saying before, the actuals of budget amounts are stated in local currency, and this is the currency that they're in. So organization 8 will be whatever else it is there. Then we have exchange rates. So 1 row per date for each exchange rate for euros, pounds, dollars into Australian dollars into USD, which is our reporting currency. Obviously, it doesn't make sense to add numbers in different currencies together. So when we look across our organization, we're going to have to firstly convert the numbers into a common currency, which in this case is going to be USD, our reporting currency. And again, that's going to be part of our ETL process, our data transformation process, to be able to get our numbers into that common currency as well. Okay, so now we can look at the first step, which is going to be data exploration with Copilot, Power BI Copilot. Now, obviously, there's lots of types of data exploration that you can do, right? So the first step in our analytics workflow. There's lots of ways to explore data, and when you get data, you should do things obviously like check data quality and things like that. But what I want to focus on here is saying, how do we figure out the type of insights we might be able to get from it? So here we've loaded in all of the CSV and Excel files straight into Power BI. We've used the folder connector to combine all the actuals, and there's just the default relationships in place. So we can see here, we've got our actuals table, budget, chart of accounts, and all our reference data files. And what we're going to do now is actually ask Copilot to give us some examples of topics for analysis. So we're going to firstly just say, can you describe this data set? And it actually gives us a pretty good description of what this data is. It says it's an overview of financial performance, actuals and budgets amounts, organizational structure. So the next thing we can say, okay, suggest some content for report pages. What type of analysis could we do on this? And when we click create for any of those, it will create a prompt for us. So this one, when you click create, it will create a prompt for financial performance analysis. And then it creates the visuals for that page. We create it. So let's just do the financial performance analysis. And that's the prompt it's created according to those. And now we can see the visuals that it's created once you give it a second. Part of the reason pre-recording this was to cut out all the time Copilot takes to do this. Must have missed one.
But this makes it so nicely. Yeah, good things take a while. Or
yeah, here you go. There you go. So it's done it now. So we can see the visuals it's created. So it's a few simple bar charts. I mean, it's okay, but what's really lacking from here is any context to these numbers or any specificity. It's just the total amount in local currency, which obviously makes no sense anyway. We just said it doesn't make any sense to add together all those numbers in different currencies. And what does this number really mean, right? 400 million. Is that good or bad? Is it profit? Is it revenue? You know, and actually all these numbers look the same on this bottom chart. So it suggests there's kind of a relationship missing. Fair enough. That might be something actually we need to go back and fix in our data model. So I think it's about, if we were expecting this to give us a completely usable report that we can just give to our stakeholders, then clearly you would be disappointed with this. But actually this is quite useful because it allows us to get a view of the type of analysis that we can do. We can take this to our stakeholders and say, what about doing an income statement analysis? Is there value in analyzing the exchange rate impact? And especially if you're not from a finance background yourself, that's going to make you sound quite clever going into that stakeholder meeting and asking those kind of questions and giving you that type of insight that you might be able to get. So next, see what we. And next, we've asked it to. Yeah, so here then we're just asking it to analyze the financial performance based on these insights as well, right? So as well, we produce the visuals, and we can actually say, can we actually tell me what the financial performance is? So say the UK division had the highest spending, research and development had the largest budget, and that's just really what it's showing on the page. But it's good to be able to have this. Again, this will help with our kind of understanding of this data. And if we look at some of the other visuals it's created, so we've got budget versus actual. Yeah, again, it's giving us some graphs. Don't really know what they're telling you. You know, they're simple at best or misleading at worst. So don't use them, but use them for an idea as to the type of the analysis that you can do. What we'd really want to see here is things like variances between budget and versus actual, or what's driving those variances. And same with exchange rate impact. It gives us an idea that we might want to have a measure in there that's the average exchange rate over the period. Yeah, not hugely valuable. Income statement analysis, here we would have liked to see an actual income statement, perhaps for a given month, and see monthly, quarterly values. I've asked it then, I said, can you add a slicer to actually give us the month? And it says no. I said, can you produce a formatted income statement? No. So that's fine. Okay. It's not going to do the work for us in producing that. But as I say, hopefully it gives us a bit of an idea as to what we can do for the next step. So the next step is going to be quite new to people, I think, as well. It's an interesting one. It's requirements of data modeling. And so what we want to do now is take those outputs that we got from Power BI Copilot and speak to our stakeholders about it. And especially if you don't have a huge amount of, that was helping the highlight there. If you don't have a huge amount of experience in things like finance, we could use ChatGPT to help us here. It's all about asking the right questions and passing those responses back into ChatGPT to tell us, to ask it what that means for our data model. So we start here with a transcript of an interview between myself and a hypothetical finance manager, where I'm asking what kind of insights they want, what business questions do they want this report to answer, what context they want, how are they going to be able to evaluate performance, and what are they going to do with those insights. And these are the really useful questions to ask. So you notice I'm not asking what visuals do you want to see on the page, because we could work that out once we know what it is we want to show. So now that we've got that, and they're talking about a bit about their process, they're talking about they calculate variances, they want to look at why those variances are occurring. They don't have the time to be able to dig into that analysis. So it's okay, this is really useful. And this is then what we can then build in here as a scoping template. So it's a very simple one pager. It's something I've used for a long time. It's the first module in the course that's available for free. We show for each area of the report, who's it for, what's the key questions that they want answered with this report, what with the context, what kind of KPIs or measures do they need to see to answer those questions, and what do they need to view and filter those by in order to be able to answer that. Now, for those of you who are from a BI background on the call, you'll recognize that as facts and dimensions, but that's not the conversation we're having. We're not talking the technical language with these stakeholders. We're just asking them what they want to see. What's their problem statement? Who's this for? and why they're interested in. So let's now put this into ChatGPT. So we say, here you go, here's the interview that we have, a transcript of an interview that we have, and here's a scoping template, a blank scoping template. Can you use the interview to populate the scoping template? And it says, yeah. Finance team needs a detailed and automated report. I've populated it into the scoping template. Let's have a look at it. And it says here, we've got a problem statement. The finance team need a detailed and automated financial report. These are some of the questions. What's the monthly performance? How does the current month's performance compare? And then this is one I completed manually. And I just wanted to show you a bit of the contrast. It's a bit more detailed. It's got a bit more context to those questions. And again, that's something you really need to quiz your stakeholders on. Why is that important? Why do you want to see that number? Not just because it was in an Excel report that you had previously. But I think that ChatGPT example gives us a really good starting point. We can then go take that as a starting point and start to say, okay, what's driving? Think about what's driving those numbers. And then the next thing we need to do is start to think about designing our data model based on this. So, we've got some ideas of KPIs and measures and what we need to view and filter them by. So we then need to think about, well, what data do we have? What KPIs and measures or numerical attributes do we have by which dimensions or attributes? Because actually you might have numerical data scattered all over the place. And we need to think about, do we bring that together into a single fact table or multiple fact tables? Or how do we structure our data to be able to produce a data model that's going to be able to answer these questions? And a great place to start with that is something called a bus matrix. So this is, again, another template that's on there. And we map with a tick or a cross which numerical data points we have. So we have our actuals, local currency amount, budget local currency amount. By which attributes? Do we have them by date? And then by date, do we have them just by date or by month, by quarter, by year? By chart of accounts, do we have them by the full chart of accounts? We might have things at different granularities, as we saw with actuals and budget. And again, this is something that's very useful to do, not very commonly done, and something we can potentially ask ChatGPT to do. So we passed in the data in a zip file and passed in that blank bus matrix template and says, can you use the data to populate this? I'm keen to understand which numerical data points I have by which dimensional attributes. Okay, let's see what it's done. And okay, so yeah, it's had a go. They're doing that. Download the populated bus matrix. Yeah, slightly more disappointed. It hasn't really been able to populate the template. It's got the rough idea of what I was asking. So maybe that template wasn't a kind of format it could work with, and that's fair enough. Maybe we need to think about custom GPTs or something to do something like this. If we want to be that specific, right? And Gen AI is obviously Copilot's a very generic, so ChatGPT is a very generic tool. So here's an example of a completed one. We can see here we've got our budget amount. It's got tick stroke cross against date because it's not at a date level, it's at a month level. And we've got actuals is against date, chart of accounts. I think we scroll down and see budgets not against department. So we know then kind of, we can either combine all this data, actuals and budget data together. Also asked it to just produce a bus matrix itself. It's not giving it a template, just said produce a bus matrix based on this data. And this is kind of what it did. So very high level, it's okay. Again, it's okay. It's a starting point, right? We might want to do something a bit more detailed. And maybe we need to, if we want ChatGPT to be able to give us that level of detail, that's probably something custom. The last step in this data model design is to actually turn that into the design of a schema. So what facts and dimensions do we need? How do we want to structure our data to be able to do it? This is an example of a StarNet diagram. So we put our numerical attributes or measures in the circle here, and then around the edges, we have our dimensions and our attributes. So these are just kind of text boxes in Word. So again, this is going to be our fact table. This could be our dimensions. We might have multiple stars. So again, now I've passed it the manually completed bus matrix and said, can you please populate a conceptual model diagram for me? Here's a blank conceptual model. I gave a bit of feedback on the bus matrix as well. It's important to tell it. And let's see what it's done here. So yeah, it's just kind of listed out some of the attributes here. Now, to be fair, asking ChatGPT to populate into shapes and text boxes of word is probably asking a bit much, right? It's not kind of what it says on the annotation there. So, fair enough. And again, we would have to be more specific if we wanted to be in terms of that. This is the example of a completed one. So again, we've got our actuals, totals, amounts, and then that's split by organizations, the chart of accounts, income statement rows, departments, and transaction dates. The circle here indicates it's a hierarchy, and the line just indicates it's an attribute. So we can start to think about this. And this also tells us actually what specifically we need. We might have way more data than this in our data set, but if it's not on that diagram, we don't really need it. Let's take it out. Our model will be much more focused and much simpler and probably much more performant. And again, we've asked it to say, just produce a conceptual model. Not quite what I was looking for. Again, maybe we could look at other ways of doing that. But again, maybe a useful starting point for us to do that. So now we get on to the tech stuff. So that was all kind of context, right? So we use a Copilot as well to help us in ChatGPT. So now we're going to look at data shaping and transformation with Fabric. So now that conceptual model has given us the blueprint for what we need to do in Fabric or what we need to do in Power Query, whatever, to be able to shape our data. That's what we need to end up with. We need to end up with our actuals, fact table, and these dimension tables, and then maybe our budget fact table and these dimension tables, and something will be the same, obviously. So so now let's have a look at this third topic. So this is data shaping and transformation with Fabric, obviously using Copilot. And we're going to use what's known as a medallion architecture here. So we have workspaces in Fabric for bronze, silver, and gold. We have lakehouse, a bronze lakehouse and a bronze workspace, silver in silver and gold in gold. And that's basically just going to give us our data raw. So bronze is basically our data landed. We don't touch it. It's just there as it is. We then reference that, shortcut it in or link it into a silver workspace. And silver is where we do all of our data transformation and cleaning. And gold is where we land our factor dimension tables in the end state that we need in our Power BI data model. So gold is where our data models actually sit that we use and our Power BI reports sit, and other use cases as well, potentially in there. So it's just a way for us to separate out that architecture. So this is our bronze workspace here. And we can see here that we've got two sections of a lakehouse. We've got the table section, and this is where our data sits in Delta format, and the files, which can contain, it's like any other data lake, contain files in CSV, Excel, PDF format, anything like that. We can land data into the file section using OneLake File Explorer, which is exactly like OneDrive app for Windows, or we can connect to data sources, obviously, and bring them in. And so now we go to our silver workspace, and we're just going to create a shortcut to that bronze one. So we're going to create a new lakehouse in our silver workspace, call it silver. And we're going to say create a reference to that file. So again, we don't want to duplicate the data. And that's traditionally what we would have done. We would have copied that data over into another space. And then you've suddenly got two copies of the data. If something changes there or gets added into there, it won't get reflected. And you have to rerun that pipeline. Whereas here, we're just saying, we're just going to create a copy of that data in here. And also for access permissions and all the rest of it, it makes sense to kind of have it as a reference in here. So again, it's in our, so now we create a shortcut to it. And this is in our file section. It's not in our table section. So it's not Delta Lake yet. So we have to do something with this to be able to convert it into a Delta Lake format. And this is where notebooks come in. So notebooks are a way for us to be able to write code against any tables or files. We can write code in Python. Python is the most common. PySpark is a language, and it's very performant. So the Spark engine is basically a big data engine that's used to working with large data sets and very performant over large data sets, much more so, I should add, than Power Query, by the way. So really, really efficient way of doing our data transformations and things like that. You can also write in other languages, I think R and HTML SQL, Spark SQL, but then again, you can write Spark SQL in Python as well. So actually, we're going to just create a notebook, and PySpark is our real language here to do that. Now, I know there's a lot of people, myself included, who are not overly familiar with Python and PySpark. It's good. It is a good thing to learn, given how many use cases there are against it. But also we've got Copilot to help us, right? So Copilot can help us write this code, right, that we need to do. So we created a new notebook. We need to install some libraries for Copilot. So when you click on the Copilot tab, it says create some libraries. I'm not sure why this starts freezing, by the way. Right, so then that opens up the Copilot pane. And we can see here, we've asked it to combine all the CSV files into a single data frame and remove those top 4 header rows from each file before combining them. Let's see what it's done. That's our prompt. And it's actually just given us the code for that. So you see here, it's given us the code and it's given us a description of that code. Oh, sorry about that. I'll go back to that. It's given us a description of that code as well, which is actually quite convenient. So yeah, I think this is what it is. Yeah, so it's given us that code and we can just insert it straight into our notebook cell. So you can see it's done. Import. We've also then asked it, import pandas, loop through each file and combine it into a data frame. We've also just asked it to say, could you give us the total value for each month in the data frame? So if we have that data somewhere else, those values calculated somewhere else, maybe we could use that to corroborate this and just check that it's not bringing in complete junk. So we're getting Copilot there to help us write this code. And which we can, it's going to be a real help. So now I think then let's have a look at what else we've got. So we've got then, so then I've started to get a bit more complicated. I've said, look, the organizations table in here contains organization key and indicates the currency. Into the exchange rates table, can you calculate the amount in USD? So let's see what it's done there. So now it's given me some code and I put it in there and I've run it and it's come up with an error. Now, if I go down to the error, it says no such file or directory. So I'll scroll back up. And actually, because I wasn't specific enough, I didn't say where this data is. It's not going to scan my entire data set to look for an organization's word somewhere here and things like and try and join it. So I have to be quite specific about what I want. That's fair enough. Also, I mean, if you get general errors on there, you can also just pass them back into Copilot and just say, it's coming up with this error. Can you revise the code? And it might take a couple of attempts, but generally it does actually fix those. So next, we're going to look at Copilot in Dataflows. So Fabric has Dataflows, a Power Query online, almost identical to Power BI Dataflows if you've used those. A couple of differences, one of which is that you're able to write your output back to a lakehouse. So whereas Dataflows really, it stores it in Data Lake actually behind the scenes, but that's behind the scenes by default. And you could just use them in Power BI. Whereas here you can say, write it back to a lakehouse in Delta format already. So I don't need to do any notebook conversions or anything. And then I can put any Power BI, any Fabric workload on top of that, including Power BI in direct lake mode, reading directly off those Delta files, or I can put SQL warehouse, I can put anything on top of it. So that's one of the real advantages of using Dataflows in Fabric. So we're actually here connected into our Bronze Lakehouse. So our data source in the original query in Power BI Desktop, this was connected to Teams, but now actually we've got our data in our Bronze Lakehouse. So we're just connected into that. We could have also obviously connected to the shortcut to data in Silver if we did that. We've then got our queries to be able to just extract them out. We're using the same combined binaries feature to bring all of the actuals data into a single table. And we're applying a transformation step to remove the header rows. So all of this stuff is really, really easy to do in Power Query, right? I'm saying that probably because I'm much more used to that than notebooks, but also it is just very easy. And now we've also got Copilot here. So let's have a look at what we've got with Copilot. So if we go now and say, yep, Copilot, it says it can, we don't need to install the libraries here. It says it can create a new query. It can add a step to the existing query or can describe an existing query or steps. Okay, sounds good. Let's go and ask it to add a column to our actuals table that brings in the currency code from organization. So it does a join on the organizations table, on the organization key to bring in the currency code. And as you can see there, it's done that. It's just written the code to say table, which is the same as if we did merge and then selected those two columns. We're now saying next one, we get a bit more complicated. So we say, it said it's done it, join on the exchange rates. So we actually unpivoted that on data and currency code to bring in the USD per unit. So similar to what we asked for the notebooks Copilot. And here it did do it. It also tried to add an extra step in here because it read the word per unit and it somehow thought it needed to do a divide, but that was just the name of the column. So it's trying to be a bit too clever. So we just need to delete that step. It's not necessary. It was just the Dataflows Copilot trying to be too clever. But once we delete that, and we can see the red bar, they're indicating that those cells have errors. All of them have errors. And then once we delete that, that's fine. It actually does give us the USD per unit. And then lastly, we've asked it to do a custom column. So to say, use this USD per unit. If the organization is USD, currency is USD, then there's nothing in our exchange rates table that will return null. So there's nothing to do USD to USD because it's just one. So then just return the amount in local currency. Otherwise, do the amount in local currency times the USD per unit. And it's just given us the step there, and it's written the code for us. Now, most of the stuff I'm doing here is quite simple, and you have to be quite specific about what you're asking. And actually, if you know enough about how to use Dataflows and Power Query to be that specific, then it's probably easy for you to just do it through the UI. But it's this idea. And now we're just looking in here. We could set a data destination to our query. So all of those end factor dimension tables, the ones that are load. So once we've done our transformations, we then say we want to write these out to a lakehouse. So we choose the workspace. So we choose the gold workspace. So we want to land them in that gold workspace. And we choose the gold lakehouse here as well. So we just choosing that lakehouse. We just created that in advance. So PPF data gold, table name, actuals. Had to give it a different name there because I had one called actuals already. And we can see then it's also mapped the data types. And that's really important to make sure those are right. If it's a variable data type, it won't work properly, and there can't be spaces in the name, so it actually replaces spaces with an underscore. But now we've got our data there in the gold lakehouse. So I'm just going to crack on to get through these, and I'm conscious there's a lot of comments in there I can see on the other window, but I'll come back to those. Right, now we're going to look at building a semantic model. So now we've got our data in there. So just wait a second. So this is now building a semantic model from our data. So if we now look in here, we've got our data in the gold layer. So if we click the lakehouse in here, we can see this is the outputs from our data flow. So we've got all those tables as delta tables. So say they're already all usable by any workload. We can run SQL queries against it straight away using the SQL in our measures and relationships and things like that. Now, there's a couple of ways we can do that. And one way I wanted to show, which is a bit different, is that actually we've already got an import mode model. We've already got a data model and a report that we built connected to Teams, whatever. And we want to use all the measures. It's got all our measures in there already and all our relationships and everything. We don't want to have to rewrite those or copy and paste them into a new direct lake model, which is unconnected to this lakehouse as a data source instead. So what we can do is we could use something called Senpai library. It's notebooks also. So here, if we look at this is the report side. I was just showing the report that we've already built. So we've already got an import mode report and semantic model, and we'll look more at the report afterwards. So this is the report. We'll come back to the report, but we also have the data model for that. So what this is in the notebooks, so Michael Kowalski from the CAT team in Microsoft has actually written a whole load of functions on top of a library called Senpai that allows you to do things like this, like migrate from import mode to direct query. So the idea is that there's a library in PySpark, in Fabric, that allows you to query and read semantic models. And that's really, really powerful because you could read them across workspaces. You could look at relationships you can have and things like that as well. So here it's just copying them all over and it's showing the objects that are migrated or not migrated. I did have some challenges running this and actually rebinds the report. So that import mode report that we've got connected to an import mode model, we're going to rebind it to direct lake which is our direct lake model now, that the new lakehouse tables that we've got. And the reason we'd want to do that is to have the benefits of Fabric Direct Lake, like the performance and the not having to refresh. So now we can open that direct lake model. As I say, this isn't actually the completed example. I did have some challenges with this, but here we can also create measures. So this is the other way of being able to create measures. We can just go into here and edit the data model and add measures in ourselves. And the next way of adding logic to our data model is to write DAX queries. So we've got the DAX query editor. So not sure people on the call have really used this before, but this is really, really powerful to be able to write a whole load of DAX queries. Like, it's better than the actual DAX little window that you have here. So what I actually did here was actually go into the desktop model. So this is Power BI desktop, go to quick queries, define all measures in the model, and it actually defines all of our measures. And we could actually copy this code. We might need to tweak it a bit. As I say, table names can't have spaces and things like that. But for the large part, we should, in theory, be able to copy and paste that into this DAX query view and create all of those measures in bulk against on our direct lake semantic model. So, really efficient way of being able to create models, measures. Obviously, we also have Copilot for creating measures, right? And in DAX query editor, so this is DAX query editor, we've said here, write a measure for cost income ratio, operating expense and portion of revenue. And it's given us the measure that looks right. And it will explain that measure as well. So then once we do that in DAX query editor, we can say update model with changes. So here we're writing measures to the model using Copilot to help us write those, to write that DAX. It's a good idea to still be familiar with DAX and check what it's writing. But explain this query is really useful because, as I said at the beginning, right, Copilot isn't just looking at the tables and columns, and that's one of the main things, but it's also looking at descriptions. So actually, we want to make sure that all of our measures have descriptions. And you can see this is actually giving us a pretty good description here. It's broken down what it is, and it also says that it's calculating the ratio of total operating expenses for financial analysis. So where we want to go in and add these descriptions is in the metadata here. So in the model, we can go to the description, the properties pane, and we can ask Copilot to write it here. Actually, it's a different description, which is strange, but anyway, and this one's less detailed. So maybe we could just use the one we had before. But either way, if we wanted to use this, we can say, yeah, Copilot, or try again if you don't like this description, or just write your own. Really important to do, though. Next, we want to look at this idea for linguistic schema. So as I say, metadata is really important for Copilot to be able to understand. And it's important for Copilot to understand the language that you use in your business because it might be quite specific, right? So this is where this idea of synonyms comes in. So actually what, you've called this field or this measure, you called it revenue, but actually it could also be called turnover. Someone might type in turnover. And unless that was a synonym, it wouldn't know that turnover is the same big as revenue. Now, synonyms are actually generated by default using Copilot and using AI and its understanding of the English language. So actually, as you can see here, it's automatically generated these synonyms, but we can go in and add our own. So it called it turnover actual, but I've just added one called turnover. And so, yeah, earnings after tax, earnings and profit, again, synonyms. So, really good to make sure that these are all in there, especially if you have ones that are specific to your business that you might refer to your organization units as BUs or something like that. You also have this idea of verbs and relationships. So we're doing things like earning or spending. So if I wrote into Copilot, wrote a prompt to say, how much did we earn? It's not going to know that that's revenue necessarily, right? Again, it might do if this stuff is built in, but we can say here, organizations spend cost, they spend OPEX measures, or we can add a few of these to kind of say these are the kind of things that when people refer to earning or spending money, that's what it refers to there. So yeah, very useful to be able to set those up in Copilot, for Copilot to help Copilot. And that's all part of our semantic model, right? Our semantic model has our measures, it has our relationships, it has our data structured in the right way, and our relevant security logic. So now we've got our data model, we come on to data visualization. So for this, I'm going to show some examples of some storytelling techniques that I've done with Power BI. Let's say this is the same thing I'm doing in the course, so I'm actually using the same course report and actually just showing an example of what that report looks like that we build and some of the visualization techniques that we use in there. And this is not the kind of thing, at least today, that Copilot's going to be able to do for you, right? I see visual Copilot very much as that. So we start with some metrics along the top. And the key with here is we've got context. It's not just giving you a number to say your revenue is 8 million, because is that good or is that bad? Well, actually, it's better than it was last year, and the trend is going up. So, we're getting some context there here. We've then got a fully formatted fixed income statement. So actuals, budget, variances, variance to actual, variance to prior year, variance to budget. And we've got the layout that we want. We've got currency numbers and percentages in the same column, which is, again, important for people to be able to see this. If we select a specific org unit, then it's showing the local currency amount. So everything was converted into US dollars. And now we're showing for a specific one, it shows it in its own currency. We can see this income statement in month to date, in quarter to date, or in year to date. Again, very useful for finance people to be able to see those different views, and to try and do all of this in Excel is just a nightmare. So, you can see these kind of board packs being really valuable. We hover over a data point in the income statement, and we've got report page tooltip. So it shows us that trend throughout the month. How is our data? Where's that number coming from? But also, you want to go in and see that number. So when you present this to your stakeholders and they say, well, what's behind that number? That looks a bit high. You don't have to go back and redo another cut of analysis. You can drill in the meeting and say, well, here's all the transactions and journals that are behind that number for that month. So that drill down capability to go from a financial statement into the underlying journals and transactions, really, really useful. We've also think about interactivity with other visuals. So we've got a waterfall chart at the bottom here. Now, this is showing our net profit this month, so 1.3 million. And last month, it was 2.1 million. So we say, okay, that difference, which organization units have seen an increase or a decrease? So which have contributed essentially to that decrease in net profit? And we can see it's European operations mainly has contributed to that. So it allows us to really kind of understand what's not just this number, but what the variance is and what's driving that variance to prior month or prior year. And this shows by the net profit by default, so net income, that's synonym. But if we click on, say, revenue or another line on the income statement, now this waterfall chart updates for that. So 8.3 million, and last month it was 9.3 million. Which parent organizations, what's the bridge between those two values? And this isn't actually how a waterfall chart works by default in Power BI, by the way. It doesn't show you one value and another value and a breakdown. So we have to use a bit of DAX to get this working. But yeah, and obviously that updates as well. So when you're looking at quarter to date or year to date, it's showing your year to date versus prior year to date, or previous quarter to date. So actually, again, keeping that a bit dynamic. There's a bit of work involved in that. We're using bookmarks in here as well to tell the story. So we're saying, okay, this is another view of the income statement, where rather than having our prior year and budget, we're showing actuals, but we're showing it split by organization unit along the top. So again, being able to have these interactive features will really bring this to life. And obviously, very level security, again, really important for sensitive finance data. People should only be able to see the data that they're supposed to see. So here we're setting up a rule to say for US, its parent organization is US operations, so they can only see US data. And then when we publish this report to the Power BI service, we can assign people to that role. And then when they log in and see the report, they'll just see the US data. So again, in an Excel world, we'd have to create lots of different cuts. So next I want to show visuals, and we're actually going to use Copilot visual. So here we've got smart narratives visual. So here, this is going to appear as a visual on our page alongside others, and it's going to be a narrative. And again, finance, really, really important to have narratives. That they don't want to explain it, not just charts and graphs. You need to explain what's going on. And so the default narratives, executive summary, list of insights, questions from leadership, those are your default prompts. And by default, it will read whatever's on the page and basically explain to you what the page is showing you. But what you can also do is say, actually, I want you to reference other visuals that aren't on this page. So I want you to reference the income statement visual that we've got on our income statement page, because that's going to allow us to be able to give us a bit more variance in terms of what's driving that variance, not just the numbers gone up, the numbers gone down, but why? What lines on the income statement are actually driving that? What revenues, what costs? And so you can see now that's become more detailed. And we can actually put whatever prompt we want in here. So I've actually said it, no, I want you to tell me which specific lines in this visual, which specific lines on the income statement, operating expenses and revenues for the cost income ratio are higher or lower compared to prior year. And now it's giving you and saying, oh, actually, it's because your labor costs were higher. So these are the kind of insights which you'd have to go and drill into yourself and really try and figure out, and you might miss. Really effective to get Copilot to be able to do this. And when someone comes and views this report, that's dynamic, that will update, and this will then show the Copilot narratives there. So it's really part of that storytelling journey. And actually, I think just the last bit I want to show on Copilot for the consumption experience is to say, well, actually, we've got Power BI consumption. So now when someone's viewing this report, the idea is that you produce particular visuals to tell a particular data story, but your stakeholders might have slightly different questions they want answered. So someone's come on here as a report consumer and said, give me an executive summary of this page. Tell me what this is showing. And it's describing it. So they don't have to go and interpret all of those graphs. This is now giving you what the graphs are showing, and it's giving you the values. There's a deviation of 45%, negative deviation of that. Operating expenses was this amount. Gross profit was this. This is actually really useful, right? Obviously, it's helped by our semantic model being good and being descriptive and having good names in there. There's a few other default prompts. What insights should I look into? And it's giving you those. And then we can also actually ask questions that are not displayed on visuals. And this is relatively new in terms of Copilot. Well, obviously everything's new in Copilot. Where we can actually say, can you give me, so I think I'll ask something else as well. So let's say, how does the profitability performance in June 2022 compare to previous months in the year? So now it's saying, okay, what do you mean specifically by profitability performance? So I say it's net profit margin current year. That's kind of what I mean by profitability. It's good. I never used to do that. I never used to ask you to clarify. I used to just say no. So at least it's coming back now. It didn't quite give me exactly what I wanted, so I need to be more specific. And this is all part of prompt engineering, working out how specific you need to be and what areas you need to focus on. So I think the next question, I've actually been very specific and said, can you give me the trend in this particular measure? And it's given to me as a line graph, right? So show net income margin for each month, and now it's giving me a line graph to explain that. And that's actually not a visual I have on the page. I didn't have the net profit margin over time. So if your stakeholder wanted to know that, really, really useful insight to be able to get, and Copilot can give that to you. So I'm just conscious, the last two sections are really, really quick, and they're quite new and they're a bit more out there. So not really in the Power BI world anymore. Now we're starting to go into other areas of Fabric and starting to see a glimpse of the future in terms of, okay, we've done all this work to build our data analysis, our models, we've told a story with visualization, but now we want to really have an engine that someone can query, and a custom engine, because Copilot is good as generic engine, but I want to build one for my business, for my data that people can query, and it knows where to find that. So this is where you start to get into really, really interesting stuff with AI. So we've got here AI skills. So AI skills is a way for us to go from prompts and say, this prompt relates to this query. And the queries are actually defined in SQL against lakehouse tables. Again, maybe a reason you want to have your data in lakehouses going forward, right? You can leverage stuff like this. So what we can say here is say, this is an example prompt. So let's just go into here and we'll create a new AI skill item. So say this is a new thing in public preview. So go into more options. The description of AI skills provided in Fabric is create AI-powered workflows over your data and connect those to Copilot and applications across Fabric. That sounds ominous. So now here we choose a lakehouse to connect to. So we say which lakehouse we want the AI skill to sit on top of. and we choose the tables that we want in our data in our semantic model. Now, sorry, this is not a semantic model. This is just lakehouse tables, right? So it doesn't have any idea of the measures that we've created or anything like that. It's just the raw data in the lakehouse, which is a bit of a shame, but let's see what it is. So we say, what's the total profit for June 2022? And it translates that into a SQL query. Or it does its best at translating SQL queries. So this is saying select as total profit. So I didn't actually have to tell it about relationships. I kind of figured that one out itself. Maybe some of them it doesn't figure out, but that one it figured out. So it says, yep, from date key, where month is this and year is this. Okay, what's the total revenue? No, that's not quite right. It's now just giving me the sum of total amount. It hasn't filtered on chart of accounts for revenue. So actually that's not correct. So you really need to check what's written here. And there's a few ways now that we can train this engine. So one of the main ways is to actually provide what's known as a system prompt. And this is the notes for model. I've asked here as well to break it down by organization. And again, it actually did pick up the organization link there as well. Maybe because it's named well, it's named organization key in both tables. So here we provide a notes for model system prompt. You could use 15,000 characters as that. And here's where you'd say, this is what this data means. This actuals table could be used for this. It joins on chart of accounts. Here's where you can calculate. Here's where you should go to look for revenue and operating expenses, or in a header field. And here, look for those. Bear in mind that they've got different signs, right? So some things are shown as positive and some things are negative. And actually, you need to take that into account, because otherwise, all the numbers in our default model in our lakehouse are all positive. So actually, we need to do that sign conversion on the fly here. So we put all of that into the prompt, and now you can see it's actually done it. So now it said the header assignment is revenue. So it's done the same, I've asked the same question, but now it's joined me back on revenue. So let's see what it says now. What is gross profit for June 2022? And I did put gross profit in my system prompt. I said how to calculate gross profit, but it hasn't quite done it right. It's done it's done this. So it's done the signs. So it's basically said if it's negative, and then less the sum, so all the stuff that's positive, less all the stuff that's negative. Okay, yeah, that kind of works. But it hasn't done gross profit. Gross profit is revenue less cost of sales, or in this case, plus cost of sales if we're doing negative numbers. But it hasn't done that, even though that's kind of what I set it to do. So, okay, we know how to calculate gross profit. So let's give it an example SQL query. So let's go to our lakehouse. Let's go to the SQL analytics endpoint of our lakehouse, where we can query the data as SQL. And let's write a SQL query to calculate gross profit. So it's just copied one in here. So we're saying, I've used some of the same stuff that it came up with. Actually gave me a good idea for how to structure that. But I've just tweaked it a bit. So I said a common table expression for revenue, one for cost of sales, and then said do one minus the other. And that's giving me the right number. I double checked that against my Power BI report. That's the right number for gross profit. So now I can copy this in, and I can say, add an example. So my prompt question is, what is the gross profit for June 2022? That's just the example I used there. Obviously, if you asked it for a different month, it would know it's intelligent enough to not just crash out and say, I don't know what you're talking about. It will just know there's a different month and to tweak that query. It's just an example query. So now when we ask it, now it seems to give us the right results. Now it's giving us, it's basically following the same pattern that I gave it in the example SQL query. And we can see that that's been done there. Once we're happy with that, we're happy with the outputs of it, we can choose to publish this. So we publish this AI skill. And what that means, it makes it available via a URL. Now, I imagine we'll be able to use that URL in lots of different places. It says to use it to connect to the AI skill programmatically. You click on Learn More, and it shows you how to use it in a notebook. So you can call this from a notebook. So I imagine you could probably, if not now, in the future, I'm not close enough to it, but maybe using Copilot Studio or something like that to create your own Copilot. So someone could go into Teams and query this, and it knows there's an AI skill that knows how to calculate gross profit, and it will go back and generate the SQL query in the back end and give you the result. So this is where we're starting to see this fabric data being used now across the broader ecosystem. Really, really, really fascinating stuff. Last thing, this is literally just a minute, so apologies, we've run over a little bit. oh, sorry, is this one, but actually I think I've just got it. I've got this duplicated. So yeah. So now I just publish that. And so what we're going to do first thing is actually just call the AI skill. So I've just literally copied that code from that Microsoft Learn document, passed in the URL, and passed in a question. Yeah, so I've just put it for each month. It's given me kick me about this is that measures and everything else is a data model. But Senpai can access my data model. So as we looked at before, so I've used a Senpai library here. So I've connected to that data set and I've said, show me the relationships, show them to me visually. And or there's a function to show it visually. Nice. There's a function to say, show me the measures in my semantic model. And this actually could be an input model or a data model actually. And then I took the income statement from Power BI Desktop, went to Performance Analyzer, looked at the DAX query behind it, and copied that in here and just tweaked it a little bit. This is my income statement for every month. So now this is the income statement for all months, exactly in the format that I had it in there. So going all the way down, 1,400 rows. It's got those variances to budget prior year. And I'm like, this is what I want people to query, right? That's really useful. How do you query it? So I loaded it to a CSV, and we've got another notebook now that we can call OpenAI on. Maybe there was a way to load it into a data frame and do it that way. The vector store stuff that I store, someone helped me write, was basically all linked to documents. So I just did it as a CSV. So this is using Llama index. Don't ask me questions about all of this, please. But there's something in here that basically says, here's the file path. This is the connection to OpenAI, just passing the API key. The service context, build a vector store index from those documents. So it's looking for similarity in there and building that as to something that's become searchable. And now I can query it. So just build a query engine. So I'm telling it just kind of what it shows. Use this to provide a detailed overview of profitability performance, specifically for this period. Explain trends in revenue, gross net profit, gross net margins, and identify which specific lines of the income statement are driving the variability. So I'm trying to be more specific here. This wasn't as good as I was expecting, and I got better results with ChatGPT. It actually gave me a 3-page PDF in ChatGPT and stuff. So actually, I'm hoping that, I don't know why, it should be the same engine, but load it into pandas here as well. And I'm just seeing the pandas data frame there. That's our income statements. We've got the query engine. So we've loaded that as a pandas query engine and said, produce the summarized trends report. And it's given me a trends report. So the company's revenue was this. It's, this is the kind of stuff you could take to investor call meetings or, something like that. So again, really useful use case for Gen AI here for the finance function. And yep. And here I've asked it to do it in the style of a poem, just to finish off in a nice, friendly way. So now it's done here in July 2019. Our revenue took a dive, but fear not, our net sales kept our business alive. Cost of sales decreased, a good sign for our team. Gross profit increased, a positive trend it seems. So yeah, maybe that's a fun thing to post on your desk above the desk. But yeah, hopefully you can see there's some really, really nice examples of how you can take a business function, challenges, something that every business needs to understand their financial data. It's the core to their business. It's what's going to drive their business. And yes, can you use Gen AI to do it? Absolutely. So just to recap, we've got data exploration with Power BI and Copilot, requirements of data model design, data shaping and transformation, building your semantic model, really key, storytelling with visualization, using AI skills to go from prompts to queries, and building a custom RAG with Azure OpenAI. So those are all of the steps that I kind of outlined in this analytics workflow, which is powered by Gen AI. I wanted to leave you with a question. Will this replace the Finance BI Analyst? Do I need to go and rewrite that entire course based on what I presented? It's an open question. This is a screenshot of the course. So it's kind of showing actually some of the topics to say, well, actually, is AI going to do all of this stuff? Probably not. But, can it in the future? Maybe, right? We've got topics like, build that waterfall chart using bookmarks, have the page formatting and KPI cards, conditional formatting for the matrix visual, all of this kind of stuff we needed to build. And, I'm teaching how to build it. AI is not going to do that for us at the moment, but maybe it will in the future, and maybe we'll do other stuff. Right, thank you. Sorry for running 10, 15 minutes over on that one. Oh, I think you're on mute. Okay. Okay, you're mute. Okay, I can't hear you anyway. Maybe other people can. Hey, Mirko, I can't hear you.
Sorry.
So,
No?
right, can you start again? Sorry, I couldn't hear any of that because I think you're on mute.
I have seen how you do your presentation. Have you something inside, like a magic ring or something from Apple to doing all this? That the slides perfect.
Yeah, so I've done a couple of presentations where I've shown Copilot live, and it's always messed up on me. So I pre-recorded these, and then I edited those videos, right? So it also allows me to zoom in on what's important, add annotations, so when people are following, they can look at it. As I said, I mean, the PowerPoint deck, this PowerPoint deck is like nearly a gig with all these videos in there. So I'm not just going to share a gig videos, but what I'll do is I'll extract those videos out, and I'm thinking of putting them into a mini course like this and just making it free for everyone. So that would probably be an easier way to consume it, I think, than PowerPoint anyway.
And we have got, I think, 20 times the same questions. Are you open to share the presentation for the people?
Yeah.
Oh, this was... it's, okay, I'm get kicked out, but I have a look in the recap from the presentation. Okay, I doing now from back, now from front. Has Copilot enabled Fabric? I can take it on.
I knew there was going to be a licensing question, but anyway, okay. So the answer is no, it's not on trial capacities, so it's F64 above. And actually, that's another reason, to be honest, I did it. I do it pre because I need to remember to turn off my capacity when I turn it on. I've got a certain amount of Visio credit, and I'm using that for this, and turn it on and record it, and then switch it off again. So, okay, F64 is, yes, it's expensive if you're running it full time, 24/7. It will be, $8,000 a month dollars, I think, if it's on the pause and play option. But you can stop and start it in that option. So actually, you can have it running for a particular period, maybe just during working hours, for example, and that will cut it down significantly, right? And so yes, it is only for F64 and above, but there are ways around that. And I think, as this evolves, hopefully that will become more accessible. Either that, or I think I wrote on the chat to Abu, either that or, companies' AI budgets will increase to match it, which is what Microsoft are hoping for. So,
okay, short interruption. All the people that like this presentation, you can click on this like support, celebration, love, insightful, or funny button. Click, feel free. But here's a lot of people that say thank you for this presentation. This
cool.
was
And people
really,
dropped off, and
really,
people still on.
really awesome.
Cool, brilliant, thank you.
I have so many questions.
Okay.
But we have.
There you go. So F64.
I do my magic. Did we share the presentation? Did we share? Yeah, we shared a presentation. What's Jupyter? I don't know what this question means.
What's Jupyter? You talked about Jupyter at the beginning, right? So for notebooks.
Oh, okay.
Do you want to take that one?
Have you an ebook? Did you have an ebook?
I think that was asking about notebooks. So there's not actually, that's not that many questions actually. I thought I saw more come up. But
a newbie PBI user with 13 years Tableau Okay. I
Yeah, I've
don't.
worked on a few Tableau to Power BI migration projects, and yeah, it's interesting exercise.
I think, but I'm sure with the reality, the first AI that's working on our business was Einstein from Salesforce. But I think what we have today, the ChatGPT for cloud and so on, I like it more. I think it's what you're doing on your job. Huh? Okay, I'm a Microsoft guy. I'm sorry. I try to be fair.
Right. There was someone was asking about storage costs. Here you go. Zaz got it here as well. I know storage is cheap, right? I mean, and when you do things like mirroring, which is basically replicating a live replica of databases and stuff into one lake, that storage is free. It's storage is not going to be the thing that's going to move the needle, right, on your costs and things like that. Right? It's going to be the compute. And the compute's harder to manage in a way. Storage is actually probably the compression's really good, right, on Delta as well. So you don't know exactly how much storage is going to cost, but storage is cheap, right? It's compute that's you need to think about and manage.
Here's one of my, let's say, people I love in the data business. It's Christoph Wagner. You know him?
Who's that? So Chris Wagner.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know Chris. Yeah.
And was one of my first channels I visited to learn data. Have you also a YouTube channel?
What's that? Sorry, which one?
Have you a YouTube channel, Richie?
I've tried. I've dabbled with YouTube. Not much of a YouTuber, to be honest. I've got a channel. It's called Learn Data Insights and Power Platform Finance. There's some stuff up there that was useful. I ran like a conference, a Power Platform Finance conference a couple of years ago, which I think some of the people on this call were at as well. And the videos from that are on there. So there are some things. I will run more events, and obviously we'll put them on YouTube. But yeah, as I said, I've been really focused a bit on e-learning content just because I really wanted to try and find interactive ways of learning, right? Rather than just watching videos and reading articles and stuff. I want to have more engaging ways and more ways that can resonate with people and build more on that. So that's kind of been my focus for a while. But yeah, I'll do a bit more YouTube and maybe a meetup group in London if people are open to that. Again, I want to do a different style of presentation. I've been speaking to a few MVPs around that. So not just have a technical presenter come and talk on the topic, but do something a bit different.
And we have another question. I'm living in Germany. I'm sorry for that. I kicked out, and then all the stream stuff is deleted. We have a question from Craig. Has Copilot been able to fabric trail versions now?
Yeah, we answered that one, right, from Craig. Yeah. So it's not on trial versions. It is on an F64 paid capacity or above. So you do have to consider that for the pricing. But as I say, because you can stop and start it at $11 an hour, you can manage your cost a bit that way, especially for now, for trying it. Right? And that's at least what I'd recommend, right? You don't have to roll this out to every to your whole organization. Not every workspace needs to be on a paid F64 fabric capacity. You can have majority of your workspaces on just normal Power BI workspace capacities, essentially, or capacities, just pro, if you wanted those. And then if for stuff that you're doing, data engineering, and you are starting to use Fabric for those use cases, have those workspaces even assigned to an F2. If it's just really sporadic and you're just doing a POC and just experimenting, some of these lower SKUs are perfectly fine for that. Right, you don't need to go up to F64 for those. F64 also gives you some of that, for large organizations at least, gives you some of those benefits of not Power BI viewers not needing a license. So this is basically a P1. It's an equivalent. P1s become or are becoming F64s. But again, if that's not your use case and you wouldn't be a Power BI premium customer, but you want to use Copilot, again, just think about starting that on a smaller scale and just having a couple of workspaces on there.
And I found another question. Sorry for this, but the German internet sucks so hard. When using F64 with
so the compute, so what happens to the storage? So we answered that one as well. So that was the one we were talking about here. It's got a link on the same one to storage as well. It gives you the storage costs, but as I said, I don't think storage cost is really going to. I can't actually see the post in here, but it doesn't. I don't think storage costs are really going to move the needle that much.
I often are in companies and they tell me, oh, they have to pay, I don't know what's in England or so on. They pay 30 euros for a month, I think, for Copilot. And I think,
Office Copilot, for M365 Copilot, right?
And I think it's so expensive. And I think, how bad pay you people for all the stuff? Yeah, that's my idea. Or your people.
I mean,
it's expensive.
I think it depends. Like if you have Teams Copilot enabled and you're able to use it to capture meeting notes and action points and summaries, that in itself it could easily be worth $30 a month for an individual, easily.
Right? I use it on Fabric. I got this, and it's so awesome. So I am. It's like we have a problem, and we have defined your. It's not like ChatGPT. It's like more a nerdy IT guide you have, and you have specified your problem.
Okay, do you know what? There was quite a lot of stuff I cut out of this presentation, by the way. I know I covered a lot of content, so you might find that surprising. But what I'm going to see if I've got a data set I can show it with. But basically, there's this thing called, I'll Google it for now and show you the Google version. But there's something called Copilot for Finance. Right now, what that is Excel add-ins and Outlook add-ins. The pricing hasn't been announced for when it is, but at the moment it's free in public preview. So, things like this, role-based copilots, I think are going to be something that is going to really start to drive how copilots are used, right? Because the problem with, say, Excel Copilot or Power BI Copilot, PowerPoint Copilot, or Word, is that it's so widely used. You can't really relate it to something that you do without knowing exactly what it is you're doing and knowing those prompts and knowing how to write a formula, that you might as well just do it yourself at that point. Right? And that's what I was saying with some of the Fabric Copilots as well, like even Dataflows and stuff. You have to be so specific about what you ask it. If you knew that, it's just as quick for you to write it yourself than it is to write the prompt. But what we've got here is things like automate data reconciliation. So you can pass it two tables in Excel. Say, you could pass it, to anything you want to reconcile. So customer invoices versus your cash ledger or something like that. And you could say, tell me the transactions that match. And some of those, they don't have to be the same names. They don't have to be exactly the same format. It will figure it out. And it will tell you, here's all the ones that match. Here's all the ones that potentially match. Here's the ones that don't seem to match. And then it will give you some insights into what kinds of things match or which kind of things don't. And, there's, if you look at on the public website, there's a presentation in here that talks about Microsoft's use of this and saying how it saves hours and hours of time for Microsoft, right, across a reconciliation process. And then we've also got stuff that's I don't think is released yet, but will be soon, I think, which is variance analysis. So again, and how you can connect this into your systems, whether you can connect that to something you publish from AI Skills, whether you can, all of that's up for grabs, and I'm sure will come in if it's not there already. I know my area, Power BI and Fabric. I don't know all the rest of the stuff that's going on in the Microsoft ecosystem. I don't think it's a far fetch. I've seen in Copilot Studio, actually, I've seen Fabric there, and it said, I've seen it both as a data source and a destination. Don't know exactly what it links into, but there's definitely links. And again, I'm sure this stuff will link into stuff like that as well, or we'll just link in directly to your ERP, right? So you can just go straight into that. What I'll do, let me do a bit more exploration on this, and I will explore it.
You come back for another presentation.
Yeah. So I had another couple of videos as well. One was on Excel Copilot, but it was basically not giving me very much, so I kind of left it out. And one was on using ChatGPT for all the analysis, which I can show you if you want. I've got it open on ChatGPT if you want to have a look at that. But let's answer questions first. And if people are still around and people
we have one person left, but I am the moderator, so I what I think it's Microsoft. They have doing something. There are I don't know the word. They're trustworthy with what they do, because it's not a pilot, it's Copilot, and it's not. It's so trustworthy what they're doing with this wording. I'm so happy with Microsoft. Not all, all this Microsoft or the Apple presentations. I think this was the best they ever do. And we have a question. What types of financial reports, income statement, balance? Oh, I can take it on stage.
Could be automated in Power BI. So yes, you could do. I mean, you could do anything, obviously, depending on the data and what you need. I think the main use case for Power BI, I think, for finances is going to be month-end reporting. So kind of producing those board packs. So the typical process today is, each month they need to, close the books, get all your journals in, and then you need to do some reporting on that to stakeholders. Say what was our performance. And that's a process, maybe not monthly, sometimes it's quarterly, sometimes even annually for a business that really doesn't need to keep this finger on the pulse. But that monthly process is quite repetitive and it's quite standardized. And so, you're bringing all that data together. You're doing essentially that work that we were showing in Power Query to combine data, potentially combining it with operational data. And I think that's, again, where Power BI really shines. You've got your financial data, and then you've got your operational data, like your sales system, or something like that, that's actually got data, or your HR system, right? It's got data of your employees, and you need to bring that data together to get a view into, okay, we can see our labor costs have gone up. I need data from my HR system to tell me why, which regions, which employees, what grades are we hiring now? What's driving that increase in labor costs? So actually, this is where that type of reporting could be. Now, some of that could be standard month-end reporting, where you need to combine this data together and report on it. And some of it could be, ad hoc reporting, where you're kind of saying, okay, we need to look at this specific increase. So you can use it for both. For the month-end or kind of periodic close process reporting, that tends to be Excel driven, quite manual, and you end up with some graphs, and you copy those graphs into PowerPoint, and you write a narrative in PowerPoint next to those, and then present it, and then you present that to stakeholders, and they ask more questions about it because they say, well, actually, what's behind that number, and we need to do some more analysis on this, and then you're back to re-merging the data. Whereas these self-service interactive reports, I think, are really powerful in that scenario, because it gives them the ability. Obviously, you probably need to improve some data literacy in some of those stakeholders that you're giving these to. But once they know how to use those Power BI reports, they can self-serve themselves and answer those questions. And that's the biggest use case for it. So two big use cases. One is, I think, the kind of month-end process. And that can be income statement. It can be balance sheet as well. Balance sheet is a little bit harder just in terms of the structure of data that you've got, right? And you just need to make sure that you've got the right kind of fact tables with balances in there, because yes, you could do it off transactions, but you want to show a balance, right? So then you're assuming or hoping that all of your transactions forever in your company are in that table that you're putting in, right? So it depends on the data structure for that. Profitability analysis, income statement analysis, I think is easier and a better place to start, definitely.
Awesome.
And actually, just if you're interested in balance sheet as well, or income statement balance sheet, actually, there's a couple of sections.
You're Apple user.
Huh?
You're an Apple user.
Apple user. No, I'm on Mac. I'm on a PC at the moment. I do have a Mac. I don't know how to use it properly. This is
You
a
lost
PC.
your MVP status. I think so.
Oh, really? Okay. Anyway, yeah. So this one I did an example a while ago. So for Power Platform Finance Resources Community Events, I did one on financial modeling in the banking industry, and this is basically has income statement, balance sheet, and then it has a bit of what if parameter stuff in there. So it just gives you an example, and I've all the stuff that you can download as well from there in terms of like tabular editor scripts and stuff. It was really DAX heavy. So as I say, it's not the best place to start with what you're trying to do, but the power is there to do more.
So this was a great presentation. Thank you so much. We have no new questions. Okay, I have a lot of questions, but we have to do it later. I got a new one. Something. I explain it later. I work in social housing, and financial is very complicated. I have done a lot of. I can bring it on the stage.
I didn't find smart narratives to be that useful. So I think a couple of things. Number one, try and reference other visuals. So there was that drop down I showed in smart narratives. I can go back if you need to see it again. But it was basically in that smart narratives, it had a drop down at the bottom to say which visuals. And by default, it's just the visuals on the page that you've inserted that smart narratives visual into. But you can also reference other visuals in Power BI, so in other pages, for example, and that will help because actually you want to think about the visuals that are going to give you the context. The other thing that I showed in that example was being quite descriptive in your prompt. So the default prompts are give me an executive summary, give me a bulleted list of insights, answer likely questions of leadership. Okay, those are okay prompts, but they're just very simple one-line prompts, like 3-word prompts. You can be very detailed in there. Like I said in there, I said, when you're looking at things like cost-income ratio, go back and look at the income statement and look at what lines are driving an increase in cost or profit, or say revenue or decrease, and highlight those as the reasons for why the numbers have changed. So I think it's a bit, again, it comes down to prompt engineering and just making these things work, and it's also changed a lot in the last few months. So try it again. If you don't find it that useful, feedback to Microsoft, and hopefully they'll make it more useful. Right, so time series analysis. Okay, now we're starting to get questions.
You read it. I bring it on the page.
All right, fair enough. Okay, so
okay, you're faster than me.
Yeah, no, I can see them. Yeah. So, what about time series analysis of Power BI? So, time series analysis, there is a basic forecasting feature with a line graph where you can forecast it. I haven't really used it that much, to be honest. And again, this might be something that would be really, really useful for you to do in Python at scale using PySpark, right? So you can do that in the notebooks, either during your ETL stage and have it as an output in your gold layer where it's got your forecast, and I think that would be much better. Or if you have a data model already and you just want to apply forecast on top of that, connect to that in SemPy and then run queries off that. I think that's going to be a better way to do forecasting than necessarily the out-of-the-box stuff.
And I think you have to make this question. You have this basic data on Power BI and Microsoft Fabric, and you can download it from the sources. But when you have some special like fiscal year, like end of the year, okay, then you have something you do, but I think there are more special things. And we have a next question. This is awesome. So many questions.
I know, as I said, people are asking without after. That's fine.
How can Power BI connect with the extension functions as the ERP accounting software for seamless integration? That's more your question.
There are a lot of connectors built into Power BI. There's over 200 connectors in Power BI. Some systems it will connect to directly. So it depends on what ERP specifically. You know, a couple of things to bear in mind. Number one, that data, financial data, is unlikely to be structured in a way that you really want to put analytics on top of. So you're going to need to go through that process. And again, this is why, you know, I'm covering stuff like Fabric and things like that, because that's going to be a way to do that at scale in a bit of an automated way. Yes, you can use Power Query and hopefully make that repeatable with Dataflows. But yeah, you know, you probably want to connect it to those. And for things like, there's some applications, things like Zero, for example, there's no connector for. And to connect via the API, it's, you know, client secret and ID, so it's principal connection. So it's not going to be the easiest thing to do. So yeah, there are a few different ways to do it. But again, I think maybe if you can ping me offline, Prakata, and just ask about the specific thing, I'm happy to answer that.
Okay, we have one question left. One question I bring on the stage. Yeah, I did.
I think that was in relation to the smart narratives. Maybe?
Yeah, I did all of that.
Did you talk about smart narratives? Because it's just come up as LinkedIn user for me. I can't actually see who asked the question, so. I was going to say, actually, Shoaib, basically, if you're talking about time series, like forecasting and stuff, then that's what I was answering. If you're talking about time intelligence, like the month-to-date, quarter-to-date, year-to-date, stuff like that, that's really good with DAX. So I don't know if that's what you're referring to instead. Yeah, to do... Yeah, some stuff with financial reporting is a bit... Oh, it's in relation to smart narratives. Yeah, I mean, you did it with DAX. In terms of course, you can insert in text boxes and narratives, can't you? You can insert a dynamic measure and stuff like that and build it out yourself. Yeah, yeah, that was a bit painful. Yeah, narratives are good in code. They're not bad.
Yeah, I think it was so nice to have you here. Thank you so much. And I say bye to the people, and we make on data analytics, you get a recap. Yeah. And you have some, I think, when you have 24 hours left to go on this link here below to get your certificate. And thank you so much for attending here.
Sure.